Hello, and welcome to episode 135 of the Quiet and Strong podcast, especially for introverts. I'm your host, Cari Hall, and the marketing genius behind Quiet and Strong. This is a weekly podcast dedicated to understanding the strengths and needs of introverts. Introversion is not something to fix, but to be embraced. Normally, we'll air each episode on Monday. Be sure to subscribe to your favorite platform, leave a review. That would mean a lot to David. Tell a friend about the podcast. Help get the word out there that introversion is a beautiful thing. Today, I have a very special guest. You know him as the voice behind Quiet and Strong, and I know him as my husband, David. David Hall is an author, blogger, podcaster, and speaker on a mission to help introverts discover their strengths and honor their needs. David has a master's in counseling and has spent over 20 years working in higher education and has given many workshops, trainings, and presentations on personality, strengths, and introversion and extroversion. His book, Minding Your Time, Time Management, Productivity, and Success, especially for introverts, helps readers understand themselves and their introversion to be more successful in managing their time and productivity. Through his podcast, David shares some valuable insights, tips, and strategies for introverts to improve their communication, confidence, and careers. With his passion for supporting introverts, David aims to change the perception that introversion is a weakness by highlighting the unique strengths and valuable contributions introverts bring to the table. Welcome to the show, David. It's so great to have you sitting on the other side of the mic today.
Oh, well, thanks, Cari. It's interesting to be sitting on the other side of the mic. We'll see how your great idea goes here. But it's, as Cari said in the intro, she is the marketing genius behind the Quiet and Strong podcast. She has many years in marketing. She's a commercial photographer that specializes in branding. And we'll have to have you on and talk about that a little bit more about camera confidence.
And thank you for not sharing how many of those many years are.
Right. So I joke that I have a true in-house agency. So Cari does some of the editing. So, I'll have to watch what I say, or if I say something wrong, she has the power to take it out. Also, our son, Sam, is a brilliant editor, and he often is the editor as well. So
he's the best one.
let's see how this goes.
All right. Well, I'm going to take it over from here. So David, you have your guests on, and you have some kind of standard questions and some kind of custom questions. So we're going to start with your standard question that you ask everybody. Tell us about your journey. How did you discover your own introversion, and how did you end up as an introvert that's a podcast host?
Okay. And you've been on much of this journey with me. So we've been married a long time, and we'll be
coming up on 30 years. Do you know that?
Yeah. I don't know if I was going to say that, but yeah. So, and we're still very happy. Just growing up, a lot of my guests or a lot of people I speak with will say, I thought something was wrong with me. And I always want to clarify that too, that not all introverts feel that way. And we'll probably get into a little bit more of that. You've been a helpful part of my journey because you didn't feel like something was wrong with you. You're definitely an introvert, but you've always been confident. And that's been helpful for me to see. But I was one of the ones that felt like something was wrong. And, why can't I be more outgoing like that person I see? And I was just studying what makes people successful. And so I got a degree in psychology. That's actually where we met. We were in college. We had a job that was supporting us through college together. And we had a great group of friends. We'd hang out after work, and slowly maybe we would hang out the longest, or we started probably just getting together on our own. And it's been great ever since. And I think that's part of introversion too. I think we were both probably a little hard to get to know.
It definitely took us a little longer to get to know each other than a lot of people who are our age getting together as couples.
Yeah. And I think that's common with introverts. You have to work alongside somebody or do something together. And it takes some time to get to know us sometimes. I think that's very common for introverts. So
but
anyway,
also, doesn't it feel like we have a better friendship and a better understanding of one another because we took the time?
Oh, absolutely.
We just dive into it head first, and 9 days later, we're getting married.
Yeah. No, it wasn't like that. Getting a bachelor's in psychology was definitely a starting point for this journey. I got a master's in counseling. I'm still on the journey. I'm still studying a lot about personality and personality differences, and it's all leading somewhere. And with that, I got a job in higher education. And I think that's where it really started to click. I trained in the Myers-Briggs, and I was a facilitator for that. And if people don't know, it's a personality assessment. It does talk about introversion. It does talk about a few other things. And one of the things the facilitator said was introverts think and then speak, and extroverts speak in order to think. And that was like one of my light bulb moments. I'm like, wow, that is how it works for me. And that is a difference. About the same time, our organization also did, it was called Strengths Quest back then. It's now called Clifton Strengths. It's from the Gallup organization. And it's not about introversion and extroversion, but it does talk about naturally occurring strengths. And the combination of those two really cemented you're an introvert. Great strengths come from it. It's very natural. You didn't choose it, but you sure can choose to embrace it. While I was doing the strengths quest, I was getting some advanced training because I ended up being a trainer for probably about 500 people for the organization, doing workshops and things. And
Mhm.
while I was doing that, I went to a 3-day kind of advanced workshop where you have presentations, but then some good small group discussions around your table, some self reflection. So we did like 3 days of that. And I thought I was participating plenty. And I've kind of learned it's all relative. Like I'm talking more than I usually had in the past, but still maybe not as much as my extroverted friend that's sitting next to me. And afterward, the facilitator pulled me aside. And again, I thought I'd talked plenty and all that good stuff. And she said, and this was a compliment, I learned to take it that way, you're quiet and strong. And when you talk, people listen. And that's where all of this was born, the name of the website, the podcast. And it was like, you know what? It is a gift. I am thinking before I speak. I am putting together all of my words carefully and saying what I think is most important. And it's a gift. And my extroverted friend might be doing something different where they're thinking out loud most of the time and they have their own gifts. But the fact that I have something to say, and she was actually giving me a compliment that you have valuable things to say because people listen. And that's where this all started.
Yeah, I mean, I have a friend, you know her, Lori. She used to say people had this stream of consciousness talking. So, like, whatever thought came into their head and they spoke it out. She was not using that as a compliment, but that was really where extroversion kind of where, I first kind of heard of extroversion. Not, she didn't use those terms because she didn't really understand what that was, but she would just talk about that person just has this stream of consciousness and whatever thought comes into their head, they speak it. So you had to kind of filter out what was the actual pieces of nuggets. Whereas us introverts, we kind of filter it out first before it spits out of our mouth. So we think to speak versus, we think first and then speak versus thinking to speak.
Yeah.
So exactly what you said.
Yeah. And a big part of this work was realizing that we all have gifts, no matter if we're introvert or extrovert or have many other nuances in our personality. It's not good or bad. But the person that's speaking to think needs to recognize those gifts and vice versa. And so that was a big part of this too.
Right, right. Um, and now here you are, host of Quiet and Strong podcast most of the time, except for today. All right. Now, you also ask your guests to bust some myths from time to time. And now it's your turn. What as a myth that you hear a lot that you want to bust, and what's the truth?
And I've done a couple shows on this. So, the top
I know
10.
there's
So
top 10 and 10 more.
yeah, 10
So
more.
give us another one.
And it comes up. It comes up. I'm going to give the most common ones. I think that's important. So, number one that people always say is that introversion is shyness. And introversion is not shyness. Introverts or extroverts can be shy, and it's a lack of confidence. And the good thing is, introverts can overcome shyness. A lot of it might come from understanding your introversion. So that's a big piece. And
Yeah,
something really related to that is introverts don't like people.
right.
We're
So if you
human.
like people, you must not be an introvert.
Right, right. And we all like people. We may need people in different doses and different settings that, might be our preference, but we absolutely like people. And it's funny, you've heard this a lot from me. I'll be talking with someone and they really want to know, am I an introvert or extrovert? And they'll say, well, I need some time alone. I need some time to prepare for things and then downtime after. But I like people. So I must be an extrovert. And that's a big myth. So you can like people and be an introvert, absolutely. You might want to, have smaller settings. You might want to have more one-on-one or small groups. You might need a break after certain situations. Along with that, let's talk about the definition really fast. Often I hear people say the main difference between introverts and extroverts is how they get their energy. Introverts often need time alone after socializing, and extroverts get their energy from socializing.
Right. And
There's
I
a
know
lot of,
while you agree with that, you say, and.
and yes, yeah, see, you know me better than anybody. So I agree with that. There is a lot of truth there, but it's so much more. And if we stop at that definition, I think we're missing out on some understanding. So what I say is introversion is like it sounds. We're turning inward more often than not. Some great creativity comes, we have some great imaginations. We can think of some really amazing ideas, some innovation, all kinds of things. And it's not just that we need to take a break from people, okay? But we need to have time to think, time to focus, time to be strategic. We need a lot of time. We also need to collaborate and we need to spend some time with people. And that's an important thing to understand. The other piece of it is I don't like the thought that introverts are drained by all people. And, I'll say something, and this, you never drain me. In fact, being with you often energizes me. I never drained by you, and hopefully you feel the same about me.
Most of the time.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that most of the time. So it's not all people, but as an introvert, you need to know, what does drain you? When do you need to recharge? And so that's an important piece. But I don't think it's correct to say that I'm always drained by people because it's simply not true. But I need to understand the situations where I do need some time to relax or recharge. Like when I do the podcast, I do give myself an hour ahead of time to get into it. And I give myself on my schedule an hour afterward to recharge if I need to. If the conversation, even though I might have totally enjoyed it, I might have had a great guest, it just might have been draining to me. And I need to make sure that I don't do back-to-back interviews. That wouldn't work so well for me.
Right. One other thing that for us, like when you're home, you actually work from home now and you have meetings all day long on Zoom. And I know that drains you, but it also drains me because it's noise that's in my house. And so I actually go to a different room where I can have quiet, not because I need to recharge, but because I need to work and I can't focus. Now, whether that's a fully introvert or a highly sensitive issue, we joke about that now that I've discovered I might be highly sensitive because I don't like noise. But I think that that's something, quiet time to actually work and the time alone to focus and do some of the deep work that I need to do without having other noise and other people around is a place that's very valuable for me.
Yeah. And if you don't know, Carrie's always worked from home for ever since we started having kids. And, when the pandemic hit, all of a sudden she had me and our three kids all in her space that she was used to having alone. And again, I think your need to focus, that's a good example. Yes, as introverts we need time to focus, but being highly sensitive, you're also sensitive to noise. And for some reason I'm not as highly sensitive, but again, all these things that we discuss are not good or bad, but if you can understand them, understand the strengths behind them, understand your needs behind them, you can be very successful.
Right. And so instead of being very distracted from the noise in the house, finding out that if I go to a quieter place, I can get my work done, I can focus easier and just block everybody out that's around me, then I get my work done because that is where my introversion can really let me focus and do deep work, but not with the noise. Can't do it with the noise. Did you have any other myths along with that?
One of them is people say introverts don't have a lot to say, and it's
Oh,
the
there are so many words in your mouth.
yeah, it's the opposite. It's we have so much to say because we're always thinking. Sometimes both of us, our ideas don't stop sometimes, and we definitely like to talk them through sometimes. But it's just that we're not sharing everything, but we have a lot to share. And I mean, I'm a podcast host because I do have a lot to say. I've written a book. I'm going to write another one. So we have a lot to say. It's just we're not verbalizing all of it. We're saving what we think is the good stuff that people need and want to hear.
Right. And oftentimes I think introverts spend a lot of time thinking about it. And sometimes we don't even recognize that people might want to hear more than we actually share because we're so worried about, well, they only need this piece or I only want to share this piece. Sometimes it's harder for introverts to share because we don't want to overshare because we see other people overshare. So we're a little more holding things closely.
Yeah. And I'll add to that for me anyway. I know that sometimes everything's so clear in my head because I've thought it through so many times that I might take some details for granted that I understand, but I might need to take a little bit extra time and share more so that people understand my details. So that's something that a need I have is, make sure that you're sharing all that great stuff in your head that you've thought about a lot that maybe somebody else hasn't.
Right. Because you've spent all that time thinking about it. So, of course, it's crystal clear,
Of course,
but,
of course.
but you can't download what's in your brain to
Yeah,
somebody else.
yeah.
You have to actually put it into words and get it out there. So sometimes that's a little bit tricky for us introverts to get all of these fabulous ideas and everything that's going on in our heads down on paper or down on, explained to somebody else in a way that they can see it as crystal clear as we see it.
Yeah. And the last one, and again, there's many more. The last one is when people say introverts can't be good at, and you could fill in the blank, you could say leadership or public speaking or networking. And I'll say that, yeah, you can be good at anything. It's just you're going to take a different approach. You're going to take your introverted strengths and needs into consideration, and you're going to succeed as a leader in your own way, different than your extroverted friend might.
Right. So we covered several myths. Let's move on to the next question you often ask your guests is about what their introverted superpowers are. Now, if you've listened to the show very much, you know that David has his own, what he says are his superpowers that are deep thinking and being analytical. Now, David, I don't know if everybody else knows you like I do, but I know that you love Marvel and you love DC. So rather than asking you what superhero you'd want to be or rehashing your superpowers, I want to know what superhero is going to play you when The Quiet and Strong, the movie, comes out. Who's going to be the superhero that plays David?
Okay, so actual superheroes?
Actual superheroes, not the star, not the actor, the actual superhero. We're going to call him.
All right, should we say Marvel or DC? Let's start with Marvel. I know you think I look like Thor, so
yes, of course.
I don't think he's an introvert. I'm pretty sure he's an extrovert. Maybe Captain America. He's probably an introvert. Superman has the Fortress of Solitude.
Yes, you would like one of those.
It might be a little cold in there, though. And of course, Superman's strong. So, quiet and strong. Superman's strong. But then there's Batman, who's very strategic. He also has the Batcave. So that's probably comparable to the Fortress of Solitude.
Right. And he has a cool car and some other fun things.
Yeah. He has all kinds of gadgets and cool stuff. So let's go with Batman.
All right. Now that Batman's going to play David in the Quiet and Strong movie, which version of Batman?
Oh, Christian Bale. He's Batman.
Of course.
Yeah, he's Batman.
I knew the answer to that.
Yeah.
There's no other Batman.
So many other. Christian Bale. He's Batman.
All right. And then how did your understanding, we're moving on here, how did your understanding of introversion help you become more confident over the years?
With all introverts, we're deep thinkers. Some people are more empathic and they're deep feelers, also deep thinkers and deep feelers. I am definitely a deep thinker, like we've been talking about. And when you don't understand that you think before you speak, you can be in a situation that you kind of feel less than. If you're thinking and waiting to speak and other people are just talking nonstop, they might say, "Why are you so quiet? I got that as a child. I got that."
And that's always so helpful, isn't it, when you say that?
If you're listening, don't say that. No matter if you're introvert or extrovert, it doesn't help. How do you come back from that? Oh no, I'm not. Don't say that. So that's part of it, understanding that I need to think and then I'll speak, and other people might be talking a lot, and that's okay. The other thing is, I think we have a lot of great ideas. And guess what? If you are an original thinker, if you're a deep thinker and you think some original thoughts and you share those, you might get some funny looks. But we need those original thoughts. We need people to come up with new and creative and innovative ways of doing things. And again, somebody might make you feel less than, like, oh, that's strange, but it might just be something that we need to change the world, right?
Right. Got to help people change that perception. Now, it's funny, you gave us kind of the definition of introversion at the beginning of this episode. You talked about how it wasn't just the need to recharge, but it was also kind of going into your thoughts more often than not and thinking before speaking. But a lot of times there's a negative perception around the word introversion. And sometimes I think it's confused with some other terms that also go along with that, that maybe give people a little bit more cause to struggle. So we've got the term shyness, we've got the term social anxiety, we've got the term socially awkward. And then I'm going to throw highly sensitive in there too, because that is a little bit different. But all of these sometimes get rolled into that term introversion. Introversion, as we talked about, is something that comes naturally to us. And it's something that we can learn to embrace, but it's not really something that we can fix or that needs to be fixed, but needs to be understood. Talk to us about these other things. So shyness, social anxiety, highly sensitive, and socially awkward.
Let's go ahead and start with being highly sensitive. And both words sometimes have a negative connotation, introversion and being highly sensitive, but they
I
both
was not
come
going
with,
to be highly sensitive. I
yeah,
told you I'm not.
I know.
Just
But
because noise and smell make me want to punch things, that doesn't make me highly sensitive.
yeah. And the thing about introversion is half the population are introverts. But like I said, you've always been confident. So somebody may not label you as an introvert if they're looking at the wrong definition. As far as that goes, someone could have always been confident, been an introvert, been a deep thinker, but just always been confident, maybe even outspoken. They've known who they are their whole lives, and that's awesome. Some people, like myself, may have been shy and anxious but learn to overcome it. And with me, it was understanding the things that we're talking about. And then there's some people that might still be shy. And let's talk about that. Like shyness can be overcome. So I guess I said I was going to start with highly sensitive. Like you said, it could be that you're sensitive to your environment. Again, some good things can come from there. You could be aware of things. Maybe you're aware of things that other people aren't. Some people are more in touch with their emotions. And like I said, they might be kind of empathic and can really feel the feelings of others. So sometimes people will lump those things both into introverts, like, oh, every introvert is highly sensitive, in touch with their feelings. And, in both cases, I'm not. I don't know why. I don't know why we have our different gifts, but it's something just to understand. And we've had a lot of great guests talking about these topics. As I talk about introversion that has strengths and needs, being highly sensitive has strengths and needs too.
And I think it's also really important as we're talking about these things. Sometimes people are looking for a label, but the label is only useful as far as, what it's kind of like if you have a can of food or something, the label helps you know what's on the inside, but it doesn't mean that you can't make something really cool out of what's inside. It just I'm thinking of like a can of tomatoes. I'm like, just because there's says tomatoes on the label, I'm like, great, I know what I can do with this. I know what
Yeah,
I can make this into something really awesome. It doesn't mean, oh, yuck. So I think that we need to really take those labels and say, okay, how can this help me? Not how does this box me into a box?
absolutely. So with shyness, social anxiety, social awkwardness, they're all related, but they're not the same. Shyness is a lack of confidence, and you can gain confidence. And again, introverts can be shy, extroverts can be shy. But I will say, I think it's really important as you're working to overcome shyness and gain confidence, keep your introversion in mind. Back in my journey when I was in college, I read a book, How to Overcome Shyness. And as I look back, it was definitely written by an extrovert. And I could see
Who'd never
why.
been shy a day in their life, probably.
But yeah, I don't know. Maybe they overcame shyness as an expert. I don't know. I'll have to look into that book again. But just understanding that you think before you speak. Another thing I don't know if we've hit on enough is that you also need to prepare for things. If you're giving a presentation, attending a meeting, especially an important meeting, we like to think about things ahead of time, and we do better with that. So you can overcome shyness, but again, in the sources that you use, keep your introversion in mind and how you work that may be different from the extrovert. And social anxiety, it's more of a mental health condition, and it's an intense fear or worry about social situations. And again, your introversion may or may not be a part of that. It probably is. There may be a lot more to it, but keep your introversion in mind. Also, if you're working with a therapist, they should understand introversion. I had a great guest on my show talking about small talk. He was a therapist and an extrovert. But part of what made the episode on small talk so helpful for introverts is he fully understood introversion, even though he was an extrovert. And so keep that in mind. And then social awkwardness, introverts or extroverts can be socially awkward. But if you don't know that you think before you speak, and you don't know that you need to prepare, or even get familiar with your surroundings, take the time to look at what's going on around you. I know I've had some socially awkward moments when I'm lost in thought, and maybe someone walks by, hey, David, and I'm not noticing them because I'm lost in thought. That could be really socially awkward. I've learned, oh, just tell them, oh, I was lost in thought. How you doing? So with me, I've largely overcome all of these things by understanding my introversion. Again, there may be more to it than that, but understanding your introversion is a big piece of it. And then with social awkwardness, we're all going to have awkward moments no matter what. It's normal. It's very normal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's particularly one. So, like shyness, learning to get a little bit more confident, getting some little positive steps, you can learn to overcome your shyness. Socially awkward, you can kind of practice and also just really realize that that's normal. And, learning how to understand people's cues, you can get better at it. And then social anxiety, like you said, sometimes that's going to need a therapist because that's going to need a little bit more, but somebody who really understands if you're an introvert and socially anxious, that those are two separate things, but they can go together. I'm not a therapist, so I can't say you can overcome social anxiety, but I think that you can have help to get better at that. And then by understanding your introversion, you can understand how to navigate that better with your particular self. And understanding your introversion can help you navigate some of those things, and understanding where they're different can help you navigate and where to overcome and what you can change and what you can't change.
Yeah, I've talked to a therapist about this. Sometimes you can overcome it, but often with social anxiety, you might just be learning to manage it and it may be, persistent, but you definitely
Right.
can get better at managing it. Perhaps you can overcome it.
All right. Now, one other term that comes up really often that I'm not going to lump in with those because it's a little bit different, but this is your favorite term. He cringes every time this comes
Oh
up.
no.
When someone comes along and says, I'm an ambivert, because they don't want to be an introvert, but they're not quite an extrovert, or they say, sometimes I'm an introvert and sometimes I'm an extrovert. Or like we talked about earlier, I like to talk to people, but then I need to recharge. What do you say to those people?
Okay. So, yeah, Ambervert. I don't use the term myself because I really do think that you have a preference for either turning inward more often than not. And, everybody turns inward, everybody focuses externally, but introverts are definitely turning inward more than not. Extroverts are focused more on their outer world. And when I hear ambivert, a lot of times it's more like, I'm okay. You know, I'm a little of both. I hear that so much. I'm a little of both. And if you're saying that sometimes I like to be alone and sometimes I like to be social, as an introvert, the being social, like we talked about a little bit ago, doesn't make you extrovert. We all like people. So to me, ambivert is really like you're equal between going inward and focusing outward. And to me, it's often an excuse or just to make you feel better, like, hey, I got the best of both worlds. But really, you're great no matter what. And it doesn't even really help you that much if you say, I'm an introvert, I'm an extrovert, I'm an ambivert, if you don't know what's behind that. So if you don't know, hey, here's my strengths, like in my case, I'm very analytical. I'm good at thinking through things, but I need some time afterward. Or I like to have deep conversations. I need to learn how to do small talk so I can get to those deep conversations, but I like to have deeper conversations. If you don't understand all of that, then it doesn't matter what your label is. So I don't personally use ambivert, but I do think that you can really get to know your strengths, your needs, strategies for success. We talk a lot about that on the podcast. I hear from my guests their strategies for success in very many different areas. And so it's not about the label. The label can be very helpful because, you and I are a lot alike, so we can learn what are other successful introverts doing? How are they approaching life? So you can learn a lot from them, but none of us are exactly the same. So get beyond the label, figure out who you are, take some things like the Myers-Briggs or the Clifton Strengths, read some great books, listen to a podcast like this one, do some self-reflection. Introverts are amazing at self-reflection. So you can get to know who you are. So again, it's not all about the label introvert, extrovert, ambivert. And the labels can help, but just don't stop there.
Right. And there's so many different facets to people's personality. It's like just saying, I'm an ambivert, so I don't have to be an introvert because for whatever reason you have that as a negative. That doesn't help you at all.
No.
It just maybe, like you said, makes you feel a little bit better. But yeah, I agree 100%. I don't just vote whatever he votes. He'll tell you I vote what I vote. Did you agree with that? All right. Now, we had kind of talked about this. A lot of people feel like being an introvert might hold them back from success. And maybe that's why they don't even want to, they want to say I'm an ambivert or whatever. Or maybe they have some of these other issues that we talked about, like the shyness or social anxiety. But how has an introvert helped you be successful, not holding you back? And how do you use your strengths to get ahead?
So it's just really a matter of, in my case, I I am a deep thinker. I like to solve problems. I need to give myself some time. One of the best things that I ever did was block off the first 90 minutes of my day so that I could do some thinking. I could get ready for the day. I could figure out, if there was something I needed to do that day and give it some thought, make some great plans. And my colleague that's maybe sitting right next to me might not need that same time alone. And that was a big thing to understand is I have needs, they're valid, and the person next to me might not have the same needs and that's fine, but I also have some great strengths. So, getting back to the business that you run, you're a lot more creative than me. You do my artwork, you do a lot of cool things. I keep track of the money. It's not my favorite thing. And it's not that you couldn't do it either, but you
I
really
just don't
excel.
particularly like to.
Yeah, I know. I know. But you like really excel in some creativity. And we're both introverts, but I couldn't even touch that creativity. And a lot of times you're like, oh, just do this. I'm like, yeah, but I don't have your gifts. And so it's just different understanding our gifts, our strengths, and not comparing ourselves to others, especially when it comes to our needs. Maybe I'm at a conference center and I give a presentation. If I need to walk around outside for a few minutes after, that's normal. And somebody else might not be doing that. They might be bouncing from person to person and getting to know somebody where I just need a break. And there's been times in my life where I would have felt funny about that. I would have felt strange, but now it's like, hey, it's what I need. It's cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think too, you talked about comparing yourself to other people, and I think that's super crucial. But a lot of times we're comparing ourselves not even to other real people, but to the ideal of what we see either on TV or what someone else presents, that we see on the surface, and we don't see their insides. So we're comparing ourselves to something that's not even real. And I think that's really important to remember as well when we're thinking about what do I need and just find the way to make yourself successful, like you have
Yeah.
done. You stopped comparing and just started understanding how to make yourself better without trying to be roadblocked by what you see in imaginary, your superhero or whatever.
Right. And sometimes it's like, you might be comparing yourself to others, but you can't see inside them. You don't know their preferences. You don't know what's going on. So, yeah, just really learn to be yourself and be authentic, and you'll have so much more success when you're yourself. I've learned that definitely.
You talk a lot about careers, communication, and confidence because you've spent many, many years in higher education and working with staff and students and everything. What are some strategies that leaders can use to help their teams, or when you're working with other people? How can you help bring those strengths out, both introverts or extroverts? How can they learn to communicate better with one another? How can you leverage those strengths to help improve that team success?
I think a lot of it is just what we were just talking about. Help people come to that self awareness, help people come to the awareness of other people on your team. Again, that's where I got my most benefit. Even after having a master's, it was that professional development where you're sitting across from somebody and you're talking about your strengths. They're talking about their strengths. I tell a story. So with Gallup, with the Clifton strengths, they have a definition for empathy. And there's 34 strengths if you've never taken it before. They give you your top five. Normally they're telling you focus on your top five. Don't worry about all your strengths. I saw all mine, and this empathy was number 34 for me.
Because you're
Uh,
just a meanie.
I know. I'm a cold-hearted meanie, right? And I was sitting across from somebody I knew pretty well, I worked with for a while. And she was, I think, number one, her empathy was number one. And, she just talked about how she felt the feelings of others. And I'm like, oh, yeah, the way she's describing it, that's not happening for me. And what it is I actually do care. I care. And I wouldn't be doing all the various things I do if I didn't care. But mine's a more mental thing. If I'm trying to help someone instead of feeling their feelings, I'm putting myself into their shoes using my imagination and thinking, okay, so it's a more analytical approach. Neither is right or wrong. I just don't have that gift to automatically be in tune with people's feelings. And that was so helpful. So a lot of it is understanding this, understanding that we have different communication styles, understanding that some people are going to do better in writing, some people are going to do better in speaking, finding ways to help everybody's voices be heard. It's all tricky. It takes time, but a lot of it just comes from awareness.
Right. And I know that you've done this and I've done this as well. Is like when you see people with certain strengths, put them to use using those strengths. Don't try to say, oh, well, you're really bad at this thing over here. So let's make you do that to get better. Let's use you where you're the most powerful and you're the most force for making change and doing good because this is your superpower. We're not going to put David in the kitchen to make the super dinner. That's not going to be his superpower. But he has a lot of other great superpowers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I'm not the best cook. Carrie is the most amazing cook. So I haven't learned to be a very good cook because I can't compete. So along those lines, I've been talking about Clifton's strengths. It was really instrumental. Someone that I really look up to, his name's Marcus Buckingham. He actually wrote the book that went along with the first Strengths Quest. It was called Now Discover Your Strengths, that he did with Donald Clifton. And since then, he's written a new book called Love and Work. And it's really getting at what you were just saying, where he's like, you really need to make it about the outcomes and not the process. So you need to let people use their strengths to get to the outcomes and not worry as much about the process, how they got there, but that they got there. And you might have a couple people doing the same job, but as much as you can, let them be unique and bring out their gifts to get to that outcome, but they might go about it in different ways. And that's hard sometimes. We want to make a cookie cutter approach, and it's
Yeah,
not
well, and
usually the
sometimes we're
best way.
so wanting to be in control of something. You're like, well, you have to put it on, you have to do it this way, or exactly this way. Whereas there might be a different, more creative, more cool way that actually comes out with an even better result that you didn't think of because that's not your way. But
Right.
I think that's super important to let people kind of learn and explore and grow within their strengths and let those strengths really blossom when you can help them as learning to work together. And also, I know you've talked a ton about this, but helping other people recognize their strengths and strengths of other people around them and how to utilize those for synergy. And I can work with this person and we can do something really cool because this person brings this to the table and I bring this to the table. So I think that's a really great way of helping build up those teams and get things really done and accomplished in a way that maybe wouldn't have been before if you just had to have it exactly your way. Anyway, and I know you've done a lot of workshops and taught this to a lot of people with the strengths and with the Myers-Briggs, you talk a lot about different personality types. So your listeners probably know that you're an INTJ. Sometimes that's called a mastermind. At our house, we tease that it might be the evil mastermind. Tell us what being an INTJ means,
Yeah.
how those different personality facets. I know you'll talk about this, but the Myers-Briggs has like 16 different measurements that they kind of pair up to get you this 4-letter code. And that gives you even a little bit more insight into your personality and how you are.
Yeah. And I love it. I focus on introversion, extroversion, because I think there's some significant misunderstanding and things that we can do to understand our strengths as an introvert and have extroverts understand. It goes both ways. But there's so many other facets to our personality. I think that Myers-Briggs gets at some of those. It's a tool. So it's something to reflect on. It's not gonna name everything about you, but it's something that is a good tool to go off of. So, the I, it's either an I or an E, introversion, extroversion. That's what we've been talking about. or an N or an S, which the N is for intuitive because I guess the I was already taken. And then
That
sensing.
always messes me up.
Yeah, yeah. With intuitive, you're really a big picture person. You see, you have intuition about things, whereas the sensor is really more concrete with the details and things like that. And there
And
are
they're the people
differences.
who really like the step by step by step by step.
Yeah,
Whereas, like you and I with the N, we're just like, here's the big picture, go do it.
yeah, yeah. And we think of the details, but we want to start with the big picture. And someone that's sensing might want to start with the details. Again, we need everybody. We need people that are big picture. We need people that are worried about the details and ask some great questions about that. And then the next one is thinking versus feeling. And we've kind of talked about that a little bit. Like, I'm definitely a thinker, more analytical, and feeling someone could actually feel the feelings of others and, be more empathic. And so far, you and I are all the same on those. Again, there's nuances here and there. And the last one is the judging, which doesn't mean like I'm placing judgment on somebody, but it means that I'm more scheduled, more organized. That's important. So this is where we differ. Perceiving means, you're more spontaneous, more free, that kind of thing. I talk about this on my show or shows that I've been guests on. I say that's a difference between us. I say it's a good difference. If we tried to change it, there's no changing it. We wouldn't be happy if we were trying to change each other. But I think you're amazing. Hopefully, you think the same. But we have to embrace our differences. And even though we're a lot the same, which is probably why we're very happy together, we have some differences, but they're good. And so I always say that, I bring a little order to your life, and here's where you're the editor and you can disagree with me because you're actually on the show. And I can't just say, I don't know if my wife would agree, but now you're here and you could either
I'm
disagree
here.
now or edit it out later.
I always tease that P means the chaos at our house. So
Yeah,
I bring
yeah.
the chaos and he likes to bring the order. But, chaos is more fun, I think.
Right. But sometimes the order does stress me out. Sometimes I do get anxiety from that. And definitely you are a calming influence in my life because you're more spontaneous. And I think that those differences are good for both of us. And again,
Right.
they're natural. We need to embrace them, not try to change them. You try to change somebody, you're not going to be happy.
Yes, again, it's good. I don't have to do the books because I don't really like that. I could, but I don't like it. And
Right, right.
and you don't have to do all the artwork because you don't really like it. You could, but you don't really
I'm
like it.
not no, but it's not even that. I wouldn't be as good at it. I just wouldn't. And again, that's another thing about our strengths. Sometimes we're so close to them, you might think, yeah, of course David can just do artwork like me, but no, it's a compliment. You're gifted. And just understand that, yeah, I could throw something together. I do make design things all the time, and they don't look as good as yours. But anyway, so
Right.
we
And
have
we
our
always
gifts.
joke if I was doing the books, it wouldn't add up to the penny like it does when you
No,
do
because you
them.
wouldn't care. Yeah, you wouldn't care. Where I needed I needed to add up.
Like there's
So
some
yeah.
dollars in there. It's all fine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, we have these conversations.
And not only us, so he's an INTJ, I'm an INTP, and then we have 3 kids. 2 extroverts, pretty sure, and one's an introvert. How has understanding about strengths and personalities helped us kind of navigate having kids and just understanding all their differences? Because each kid comes and they are not the same as the last kid.
Yeah, yeah. I've said this, and I heard someone talking about it recently too. Just think, did you have a brother or sister that was different than you? Or do you have more than one child? Or do you know someone with more than one child? We come with gifts. And this was part of my, I had many different things that really helped me understand that introversion was natural. And this was part of it, is having 3 kids that we raised the same, but they're different. They're all amazing. They're all brilliant, but they come with their own gifts. And so that was part of it. And, it just really helps me to understand the gifts. One child might need to spend a little more time alone. Another child might have many friends that I can't even keep track of. And that's fine too. It's all good. As a parent, you do have to just kind of nudge along, like if you have a child that's spending all their time in their room, you might need to help them, understand their gifts and strengths. But at the same time, I think it's been very helpful. I think about when I was a kid and there was no talk about introversion, and I could have really used some understanding, about this. But I think it's helped us as parents that definitely our kids are more well adjusted. And, we're not perfect parents. you're a better parent than me, but we're not perfect parents, but letting them run with their gifts was something because we had the understanding.
Right. But also knowing when to step in and say, okay, my little extrovert, you have to get up in the morning. It's time for you to come home from your friends and actually go to
Yeah,
school. Or
right,
our
right,
little introvert, we've been very blessed with some wonderful teachers in his life that helped match him up with some little friends that really helped give him that stability that he needed when, that wasn't necessarily something he might have been able to do on his own.
right,
So I
right,
think those understanding those things and where you can help step in and lift them up a little bit where they can't do it. And then in the other case, when you need to step in and help them, tone down a little bit. Anyway, your listeners may not know this about you, but David had 8 siblings. There were 9 kids in his house, and I had 10 kids in my house. So as introverts, sometimes it's a little bit of a challenge to find that alone time and also trying to find your space in a world of chaos when you're a person that need maybe a little bit order. What would you go back in time if you could go back and talk to your parents of little David? What would you say to them? How to help little David
wow, I don't
navigate this
know.
crazy?
That's a tough question. I love my parents, but as I just said, there was no talk of introversion, extroversion. I definitely had a lot of sisters. I love my sisters, but it was a while before I got a brother. And, probably at the time, I thought that I was spending time alone because the only boy with a lot of sisters for a long time. But I think it's this time I needed. And I had a lot of great friends. It was definitely a smaller circle of friends, which is typical for introverts. I had a lot of great friends. But I think of like taking a long bike ride or walking home, a very long walk from school. I could have taken the bus, but just because I enjoyed it. Again, I had great friends. I would organize parties, but I also needed that time alone. So I don't know what I would say to my parents. I definitely just overall at the time there was not a lot of talk and it was not something they understood. But I'm so encouraged. I've had teachers on my show where there's a lot more thought going into helping the kids that are called the quiet kids really having their voices heard. So it's very encouraging. And just shows like this or books. Marty Olson Laney, she's written a couple books. She's definitely talked about the introverted child. I highly recommend that one or her other book just on introverts in general. So there's a lot more that's known that wasn't known back then.
Right. So we managed through, we're here. So, but moving forward, the
Yeah,
next
yeah.
generation has the benefit of parents understanding a little bit more about their kiddos. And yeah, you've definitely had some amazing teachers that have been on here and talked about some really cool things. Now, growing up then, as a teenager or college age, David, what would you go back in time and tell yourself? Because this is a time, those college years and teenage years are kind of when you're looking and really comparing yourself to others and saying, why am I not like this person or that person, or why can't I do this the way that person does? So what would you go back and tell yourself as you versus you then?
All the things that we've been talking about. You know what? This is your strength. This is your gift. It's normal that you want to go deep into conversation, that you want to have a close circle of friends. All of the things that we're talking about would have been really helpful to know. And I definitely like college better than high school. There's some just crazy peer pressure in high school where you're supposed to be a certain way. And definitely in college, you feel a little more freedom to be yourself. And so that's where I started to understand myself. Again, it took a long time, but I would say to that self of mine, hey, you're amazing. You have great gifts. Other people have their own gifts. Be you, be authentic.
Right. I think that's what's the biggest message to get out there. All right. We're just about here at the end of the time, but you wrote your first book, Minding Your Time Management, Productivity, and Success, especially for introverts a few years ago. And that was a big effort. I know, because I was there. What are some key takeaways just quickly from that book? Why is it important for an introvert to have an introvert time management book?
Yeah, so hopefully you're ready for the next one. Carrie's my photographer, my editor. She designed my covers, helped me get marketing done. But anyway, and when I wrote that book, I was figuring out that I was an introvert. I had a job that was full time, but sometimes even took more hours than that. As we've talked about, Carrie and I run a business together and we have 3 kids. And so while I'm continuing to research and study introversion, I'm also studying time management. David Allen's book, Getting Things Done, was really instrumental to me. But as I'm reading these various books, I'm like, oh, I need this as an introvert, but they're not calling it out that way. And so that's what made me my first book be specifically on that. So it's things like you need to prepare for things. You need to organize your time so that you have time to think ahead of time, or that you need to recharge after a particular thing. Maybe you just gave a presentation to 50 people and it took a lot out of you. You need to put that into your calendar that, hey, you know what, this 30 minutes I'm taking lunch or I'm taking a break. I might still be doing a little work, but I'm alone to process that kind of thing. Capturing our ideas. We have a lot of great ideas, just not getting overwhelmed and just really making your approach, giving yourself that time to think, to focus, like we've been talking about. So that's how I decided to write that first book.
All right. And now you're working on the next book. So what is that going to be about?
It's going to be more about introversion. It's going to be about confidence, gaining confidence, just really having your voice heard, being able to communicate, whether it be in one on one, small group, public speaking, just really having that confidence to get your voice out there, to share your great ideas, just to feel good about your strengths as an introvert while you're honoring your needs. So it's going to be more of the kinds of things that we talk about on this show.
Awesome. And it's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
So we'll watch for
And
that.
and you're involved, as you
Yes,
know.
I know.
So clear your calendar.
All
Actually,
right.
it's about halfway done right now.
Yeah, getting there. And I think we're going to have that one out hopefully this spring, right?
That's the plan. Yep.
That's the plan.
Early
Fingers crossed.
2024. Yeah.
All right. Anything else you want listeners to know about you? This little kind of behind the scenes, and get David on the mic instead of a guest. Anything that you would like them to understand about themselves, or want to tell somebody who's struggling with understanding themselves?
No, but Carrie, this has been fun because it's different, but we know each other really well. A lot of times you're on the other side, listening and editing and things, and it's been really fun to have this conversation. I always think about when I started blogging about 10 years ago, I still didn't fully understand not only my introversion, but your introversion,
Right.
because you'd be sitting next to me in our loft. We have a built in, like two spaces and a built in desk that came with the house. We'd be sitting side by side. I'd be working on my blog and you'd be editing or working on something. And I'd ask you a question and you would just ignore me. And I'm like, what's going on? She ignoring me. Is she mad at me? But no, you were just thinking. It's a gift. And so all of these things, we have gifts. We need to get to know ours. We need to get to know other people's. And really, that leads to strength. And that's where you'll be your best and be your strongest. So get to know yourself and your introverted needs and be strong, as I always say.
Thanks for
All
being on the
right.
show, David.
Yeah, thanks. It's good to have you on that side and trying out this side here at the Quiet and Strong studio. Thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to further connecting with you. Reach out at david@quietandstrong.com or check out the quietandstrong.com website, which includes blog posts, links to social media, and other items. Send me topics or guests you would like to see on the show. If you're interested in getting to know yourself better, there's now a free Type Finder personality assessment on the Quiet and Strong website. This free assessment will give you a brief report, including the 4-letter Myers-Briggs code. I'll add a link to the show notes. There's so many great things about being an introvert, so we need those to be understood. Get to know your introverted strengths and needs and be strong.